So first of all, it's really hard to follow a guy like Joe. I mean, I've been following some great speakers lately, so it makes it really hard. A little about myself. I grew up out in California. I was a policeman for 20 years. I left the police department, went right into technology, went into business development for a technology company, traveled around the world, and was about ready to retire. And I was working for some technology guys that were worth about $100 million each. And I had some young kids at the time, and they call me into a room as I'm leaving, and they say, hey, we've got something we want to tell you. I said, oh, maybe a retirement gift, a hug, what are you going to do? Because these are great guys. And they said, no, we want you to come back to work, but on something different. And I says, hey, really, I'm retired. I've got young kids at home. I just want to be the dad. And they said, hey, you run it. You do what you want, but you're not going to believe what we're going to tell you. So they sit down and they say, hey, when we were young kids, one grew up in Southern California, one grew up in Northern California. They didn't know each other. They were camping at different times in the Sierra Nevada mountains when they were young. They got up in the middle of the night. This almost sounds like a mirror story of each other. They got up in the middle of the night to use the restroom, and they each saw what they later described as a Bigfoot. They went back. They didn't tell a lot of people. They told their folks later. Nobody believed them. They went to college. They became technology people. They formed a partnership, formed a corporation, became millionaires. They were working together, and they went to lunch with some friends. And at lunch, they started to talk about the woods and how they like going backpacking and things. And one thing led to another, and they said, yeah, we had some strange, this one founder says, yeah, I had some strange things happen to me. And I went to the bathroom once, and I was looking up in the woods, and there's this thing looking at me. It was a Bigfoot. The other founder sitting next to him and goes, you gotta be kidding me. I've known you all these years. The exact same thing happened to me. So they got together and they said, one way or another, we're going to find out if this is a hoax, if it's true, whatever. And they found me. So they tell me the story. I go, oh, come on, this can't be true. And he goes, no. So I'm not from this world of Bigfoot. I got drawn into it by these guys. They said, we'll fund it. You form the team. You're a trained investigator. You know what you're doing. You tell us which way you want to go on it. We don't care if you prove it's a hoax, if it's true, whatever. If it is true, prove it. But when you come from that science perspective of technology, proving it to me from the very beginning was DNA. And I had a difficult time understanding when I first stepped into that world why DNA hadn't been done before. Because there were a lot of people that claimed to have shot one, and they got hair, and they got tissue. Well, why hadn't anybody done it? Well, what we did at the beginning is we set up a chart of the entire West Coast. And three of my best friends who were retired cops at the time, we did a pin map of all the sightings in the western U.S., and we came up with this criteria of what we wanted to use. And what we needed was a hospital within 15 miles, high-speed internet access, and just like Joe was talking about, good food. I like good food. And access to, I said the internet. And with those three criteria, we ended up in an area called Hoopa. And Hoopa is a Native American reservation, and they have a history of sightings. It's 30 miles south of the Patterson Gimlin site, that famous footage where you see Bigfoot walking across the creek. They've had sightings there for 100 years, and they have their own police department. It's a little city. It's not a real nice city. They have a little casino, not a nice casino. And the Klamath River and the Trinity River intersect very near the city. Great steelhead and salmon fishing. If you like fish, great place to be. So at the start of this, I walked into the police department there, introduced myself. The hardest thing in a Native American community is getting access to the people that have the knowledge, because they don't trust you. They've been stepped on and screwed with so much by people that they don't really trust anybody. I introduced myself, said my background. One of the older policemen there says, you know what? I can help you. He says, I have a couple old relatives that are elders that have some very interesting stories, and maybe they can streamline some things. And whammo, we were inside the tribe, and that within the next 3 days, I was talking to some of the older people there. Within a couple days after that, I had their trust. And within a week, I had access to 20 to 25 people that had sightings. Bingo. And I say a lot of that was because I was a law enforcement guy, talking to law enforcement guys, and I'd come across different than others, I think. I wasn't interested. I didn't come from that world. I didn't have a good or a bad notoriety. That's how it started. Right away, I got a hold of a person named Raven Ulibarri. Raven lived on the edge of the reservation. She was a single mom. One night she woke up in the middle of the night hearing some noise. Her motion detector lights went off. She had a little tin shed where she kept garbage outside. And here was this thing about 8 feet tall leaning over the shed going through her bags of garbage, plastic bags. Raven called the police. Her brother-in-law was working. They start responding. 2 officers respond from the Hoopa police. As they get there, I met one of the officers. He said, Dave, the earth was moving. I could feel it moving when I got out of the police car. I had a canine in the back of the car that refused to get out of my car. It had never happened before. It would chase bear, mountain lions, anything. I tried to drag the dog out. It would not get out of the car. It was cowering in the far corner of the car. And he goes, you know what that made me think? Maybe I shouldn't be getting out of the car. So his name was Joe. Joe gets out. He said that Raven says, hey, it just walked into the woods. He knew he had backup responding. He walks into these woods, and the Douglas fir trees in that area are huge. And he says he walked into this canopy, and he says right away, there wasn't a sound in the woods. He goes, I've never felt like this. And like Joe was saying, all of us have psychic ability. He goes, hey, the hair on the back of my head was standing up. And in law enforcement, one of the first things you're taught is when you walk into an environment that you're not used to, and there's a possibility something's above you, you ought to be looking up as much as you're looking out because hazards can come from all angles. So I asked Joe, I said, did you look up? I'll quote him, hell no. If there was something up there, I didn't really want to see it. He goes, I walked in 10 feet, I looked around, there was nothing there. So he says, I came back out, another officer got there, Raven and him went over, and they said right where it was leaning over this tin shed with the garbage bags, it had lifted off, and there was a whole tuft of hair that was pulled out of it while it was pulling out. Well, what we decided to do early on was something that nobody had ever done in the Bigfoot world, and that is bring in a police forensic artist, trained FBI forensic artist. The reason being is I'd used one for years at the police department, and when this guy would sit down with a witness, say a witness to a robbery, and they drew a suspect, I kid you not, when we eventually caught the suspect, it looked like he was sitting in front of the forensic artist when he was drawing the picture. That's how accurate these people are. And Harvey Pratt is a Native American Cheyenne Arapaho chief, the former head of the Oklahoma Bureau of Investigation, a man with tremendous insight. We brought him in. He drew these drawings, and this is what Raven saw when it was walking into the woods. Some interesting things about this that stand out right away is the length of the arms. They're much longer than human arms, much longer, almost all the way to the knees. But their hands are like ours. They're not like an ape or a gorilla hand. And she said you could see the muscles rippling in its buttocks and in its arms as it was carrying bags of garbage into the woods. The hair on the back of its head goes into its spinal area, almost like a mane. But the face was more human than animal, and that's an absolute consistency in every drawing we've ever done. The Native Americans in Hoopa have always considered the Bigfoot to be another tribe of people. They're not animals. And this is an interesting part, because I always ask witnesses this, as I say, so why do you think it was there? And she says, this has only happened one other time where I think a Bigfoot, I didn't see it the other time, but I know bags of garbage were carried into the woods and they weren't ripped open like the bears. And she says, weird thing is, both times, it was my time of the month. So she says, I just have a feeling it was rummaging through trying to get at my sanitary napkins. So part of that hair that was pulled out was collected, and we sent it to a lab for analysis. Now, I called 6 different university labs and tried to get somebody interested. There wasn't one university that would even talk to me. Ended up talking to 3 other scientists that were interested, and DNA Diagnostics out of Texas put probably 150 people in prison in the last 3 or 4 years through their testimony. They used 4 different university labs to do their testing. Melba Ketchum is the head of DNA, and what she did was she took this and she said, Dave, I've had 10 other people in the last 5 years send me things like this. It's the first time I ever got a really, really unusual response. And this was the first report that came out about that to us, and we knew we were onto something highly unusual. But it goes back to, I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer, and we have only been on the scene for 6 months. How come nobody else had been doing DNA testing? Now, Bigfoot hair is different than any other hair in the world, just like hair from any other animal is different from any other animal in the world, because there's something called hair and fiber experts. FBI has them, a lot of police departments have them. You look at the hair under a microscope, it looks different. Bigfoot hair is different than human hair in the point that human hair has a channel that runs down the middle of the hair that contains DNA. Bigfoot hair doesn't. It's fragmented inside the hair. Strange. Meaning that the only point you can get DNA is off the follicle, and you can only get at the follicle if it's pulled out. If the hair is shed, no. Bigfoot does not have fur like a bear, it has hair like a human. It's different. How did we get it? Sometimes the simple things are the easy ways, and the simplest things work the best. And we talked to a lot of wildlife biologists. We went the easy route. We knew where certain Bigfoots hung out all the time. Tracks, Native Americans told us this is their area, we stay out. So we wrapped the tree, the fork of a tree, with packing tape inside out. At the Y of the tree, we'd either put bacon grease or honey or some other things, and then we'd just leave for 2 weeks, come back, and we would get our samples. And we did this all across the US. And you think, wow, that's not very high tech. It wasn't, but it worked. People ask me, anybody ever shot a Bigfoot? Anyone ever kill a Bigfoot? Absolutely. And I don't like this person at all, but his name is Justin Smaja. He made a claim in Northern California that he killed a Bigfoot. The guy's right, he killed a Bigfoot. How do I know that? Because this tissue sample right here was given to us by him. His claim was that he just happened to come into this area and he saw a big Bigfoot waving its arms, and being the man he is, he shot it. After it went down, a small one's running around him, and he killed that too. And he used a pretty big rifle. He's a trophy hunter. This tissue sample came off of that. This tissue is like no other tissue in the world. The hair matches Bigfoot hair, and the coarseness of this hair is different than any other hair and tissue that the scientists have ever seen. This was one of the 4 samples where we got nuclear DNA off of. And it's one of those rare cases where I go around, I don't want to boost this guy or pump this guy's tires, but facts are facts. Just for the people that don't know, nuclear DNA you can get from saliva and blood, and mitochondrial DNA we get out of hair. Nuclear DNA, we can tell you how far back in the world your family lineage goes. Mitochondrial DNA gives us just a little bit of knowledge, but not a lot. I'm not going to get into the specifics because it'll put half of you to sleep, and I'm not that smart. But I will tell you this, that the 4 nuclear samples all came back the same, not to one specific biped, but came back with the same genome on its whole. Just to cover this, there's something called GenBank, and that's the world's depository for DNA. Now, right here it says there's 152 billion base pairs in GenBank. That's a lot. And these samples that came back, all came back on the human side of those markers. There's no animal in this, it was on the human side. This is important. You're gonna go out and you're gonna go, was Dave really full of crap or what? And this is something you're not going to read in articles, but it's in the report. There's something called a Q30 score. And that is an automated score made by the machines on the sample that's submitted for DNA. Almost everything is automated in these machines now. And anything over a 70 is considered an exceptional sample with no contamination. Our scores averaged in 85, meaning there essentially was no chance of contamination in these samples. So every time you hear somebody writing about contamination, number one, they didn't read it, and number two, they don't understand it, and number three, they're trying to just shove it away with some verbiage that would hopefully confuse the average reader. Journals. When you write a white paper for science, you submit it to an academic journal. And these journals, I say it's an academic journal because they have all these PhDs on their board. Some of the advisors we had before the paper was submitted had written in excess of 30 white papers. They knew exactly what needed to be in the papers for acceptance. So after they point out it's there, there, and there, the journals went back to their advisors. I'm sorry, we can't accept it. This happened not once, not twice, but 4 times. And we have, this is another important part. Before you submit your paper to a journal, you have to sign and agree that all of the communications between you and the journal are the copyrighted material of the journal. Think about this. That means that you can't release that because you don't own your communication anymore. Dr. Ketchum and all of the PhDs decided there was such collusion in denying this paper for no reason, they're going to release all the emails and let the journals sue them. How many journals sued them? None. None. And we released all the documents proving that there was collusion and proving that there was no reason not to approve the paper. And these are just some of the emails. I won't go through them. They're monotonous, but it's unbelievable. So these are not exactly human, but they're nowhere near apes and gorillas. What it says here is Dr. Ketchum began comparing sections of the nuclear DNA to human DNA to find out where it was different. All humans have a TYR gene, which is associated with skin pigmentation, and the HAR1 gene, which is human accelerated region associated with human neurological development. She found that Sasquatch DNA from all 3 samples lacked these gene sequences. This means that the father could not be human as we know it. Also meaning that the father's DNA was not in GenBank. But not human as we know it. The female gene we could track back 15,000 years to a Mediterranean region. Now this is important because people never read the paper, and then the people that read it really didn't want to understand it, but we're getting into the nitty-gritty here. As Ketchum sat down with me and a few others and tried to explain it, she said, Dave, the best way I could explain it, father didn't come from this world that we know of. It's never been categorized. And we've never had this issue. And when GenBank saw the results, they were dumbfounded. They couldn't explain it. And they want to sweep it away, and they won't put the results in GenBank. Even though 4 university labs came up with these results. Interesting stuff has just happened within the last 4 or 5 months. The Anunnaki skull, the Star Child skull, all came back with very similar results to the DNA found in the Sasquatch study. And anybody who's been following this knows that these results are all following in this one little wedge of unusual DNA. Female lineage can be tracked, but the male lineage cannot. I'll talk about this real quick. In the Patterson-Gimlin film, there were 4 high-definition plates that were made from that. The plates belong to Mrs. Patterson, Roger Patterson's wife. This is one of the plates. I went up there, sat with her for 8 hours one day when we went to a lab, and we had the plates copied. She was really a nice lady, and she said, for you, I'll do it. I won't do it for anybody else, but anybody who thinks that the Patterson-Gimlin film is faked or fraud, forget it. I guarantee you 100% with all my life, it's true. How do I know? Studied the film a lot, talked to experts. When this film came out, John Green took it to Disney Films, which made the best costumes in the world, and asked them at the time, hey, could you guys do this? They looked at it and they said, there's no way. And if we were going to make a costume, we sure as heck wouldn't have made a female costume with breasts. That would have been impossible. And when you look at the film, you could see the muscles rippling in the back and in the buttocks, just as Ulibarri expressed to me. Now, for the people who don't know, is that right here, right on the thigh region, it almost looks like it has a herniation or a bullet wound in the leg. And that's been proven to 100% satisfaction with me, because when you look at it, you can definitely see a wound. How it got there, I don't know, but there's a wound there. How that thing walks is not like any human could walk, and couldn't be replicated by a human in a lab under test conditions. So it walks differently than you and I. Height for height, pound for pound, they're much heavier than a human. That thing was about 6'7", 7 feet tall, probably weighed about 700 pounds, 600 pounds. Something to think about. We always think about this, so I'll put it on your mind. It'll warp you just like it's warped me. 67. Let's think about the ratio of humans in the woods with recording capability. What do you think? 1 in every 25, 50,000? What's the ratio of humans in the woods now with recording capability? 10. Almost everybody, right? How come we can't get footage better than this? Makes you think, doesn't it? Why can't we?
Too many people in the woods. That's why.
Huh?
Bigfoot went underground.
Still the same. I think there's more sightings now than there ever have been. I mean, credible ones. Somebody's getting film. I don't know what the story is, but I think it's weird. This is still the best footage in the world. Thinking about why the paper wasn't accepted, academia is not ready for it, or somebody's not ready for it. I don't know who. Why hasn't DNA testing ever been done before? Somebody pulled me aside at a conference about a year and a half ago, right when we were in the middle of this, and said, Dave, it's been done many times. And they knew all along, and they wouldn't make it public because it ruins them. That's what their whole world is about. Every habituator, meaning an old couple lives in the woods, has visitations, every habituator says they're human. The ones that are around them. 7 different Native American tribes that I've personally met, gone into their woods with them, every one says they're human. So now you're talking about every group of people that lives around them says they're human. DNA says they're human. It's not even a point to me worth arguing about. It's time to move on because the world isn't ready to hear what it is. I was sitting down and I have 2 kids in college and they're smart kids and they understand. I said, you know what, maybe by the time you're my age, the world will start to accept what this is. Maybe not. And they said, yeah, this is ridiculous. I agree. I think there's a lot more to the Patterson tape than we know. I don't know, but to catch that thing out in the open for the length of time it was caught, something else was going on. They do not put themselves in that position. Ever. Sir?
Back when I was still watching TV, I used to watch that Bigfoot show with those 4 people with Bobo, and I forget all their names. They would go out looking for it, and I get the feeling after a while that these people were withholding information. It was kind of silly after a while. What's your opinion of that show?
So, out of the Bigfoot world, I'm one of those guys that stand out by his own because I don't talk bad about anybody. But that show would drive anybody to stop watching TV. As somebody said to me years ago when it first started, the title should be Not Finding Bigfoot. Everything that they do in that show, we don't do. Everything they do in that show, Native Americans don't do. Think about how many Native Americans on that show have said, oh yeah, it's a human, it's one of our brothers, and then one of the people on that show says, yeah, it's an ape or it's a gorilla. They completely ignore what people say. And as the elders in Hoopa told me when I first came in there, they said, this is their area, Dave. And you've got to respect it like it's their area. If they walked into your house and started screaming and yelling, how would you be received? Treat it like you're walking into their house. I tell everybody this, I'll tell you this. We are under the firm belief that you don't have to go way back into the woods to find Bigfoot. You don't have to be like an ambulance chaser and say, oh, there's a sighting over here. Let's go over there. I, along with my fellow people, believe that some of the major trailheads in some of the biggest wildernesses are watched by them. They know who's going in and who's going out, and the Native Americans believe they have scouts at these major trails, and they're telling others that it's coming. You hear a hoot or a holler, it's probably a Bigfoot. It's probably not an owl letting them know what's and who's going in. Yes, ma'am.
Do the Indians think that they bury their dead, or?
Yes. Okay. And you got to remember that they have about 10 times the strength of you and me. And the Native Americans have said all along that they bury their dead, and they either put a giant boulder over the body, or we've also been told that they bury them under a tree. First of all, Bigfoot isn't a crypto topic. That's a mistake, and it's been a mistake for a long time because it's human. Crypto means unknown animal. So some of these old-time authors said, oh, I'm a crypto specialist, or I'm a cryptozoologist. Actually, Bigfoot is a hominology topic. And along your question lines, there's an article in 1934 written in the Oregonian newspaper. And when we first found it, we were dumbfounded that we had never seen this before in the Bigfoot or Sasquatch community. But the longer we went on, we understand, well, we know why this has never been brought up. In 1934, there were some people walking through a trail up in Oregon, Washington area, and they had rocks thrown on them. And they saw these things. And they came back and told the sheriff, and the sheriff in this county says, okay, we're going to get a big posse and go up there and kill them. They didn't know really what they were dealing with. 3 Native American tribes got together and held a press conference in 1934. Think about this. Think about the ridicule people had for Native Americans back then. But these Native American tribes get together and they're holding a press conference. And they said, hey, wait a minute. You guys don't know what you're dealing with. They have special abilities that you and I don't have. And don't go out there searching and trying to kill something that you don't understand, because you may be having to dig a grave for yourself. So they can mimic things in the woods. This is what they said in the article. Special abilities you don't have, much stronger and much faster. And we've been trading with them for years. They're another tribe of humans. So wait a minute, let's back up. That article said all of that. Yet, you're not going to see it anywhere, because the old group of Bigfoot researchers who believed it's an ape, it doesn't fit that paradigm. Yet, these 3 tribes get together and risk their name in front of the American public in 1934 to try to state the truth. It's ignored and swept under the carpet. Now, Joe told me, first time I ever met Joe was this morning, and he starts saying some things about, you know what, if you say something that's against the world beliefs or against the intelligence community, they're going to come in, they're going to bash you, they're going to attack your personality. You know, that's exactly what happened when all of us stepped into that Bigfoot world and tried to tell the truth. That is exactly what happened to me. I was attacked, my people were attacked, the books were attacked, not because we weren't telling the truth. They were attacking over anything. So I think I'm super glad to be away from that Bigfoot world, because it's not worth it to me. And I think in my own mind and in the scientist's mind, we proved our point, and there's really nothing else to prove.